The chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 frozen stars, casting golden light over the grand ballroom. The sound of clinking glasses, polite laughter, and the soft melody of a live string quartet filled the air. It was supposed to be the happiest night of Ryan Mitchell's life, the night he celebrated marrying Vanessa Brooks, the woman he called his soulmate. The guests, dressed in gowns and tuxedos, whispered excitedly about how perfect they looked together, how Ryan had finally found the right partner to elevate his life. But the fairy tale was about to shatter. The doors of the ballroom opened and silence rippled across the room. Heads turned, eyes widened, and the whispers turned sharp, like knives slicing through the air. Standing there, framed by the grand entrance, was Emily Carter. Her hair was pulled back simply, her dress modest compared to the glittering gowns around her. But it wasn't her appearance that drew gasps. It was the undeniable curve of her swollen belly. She was heavily pregnant, vulnerable, yet holding herself with a quiet strength that no one expected. Every guest knew who she was. Emily wasn't a stranger to this crowd. She was Ryan's wife. At least she had been, until he discarded her like yesterday's news. Now, she stood in the doorway, pregnant and alone, while Ryan flaunted Vanessa on his arm. The cruelest part? Vanessa wasn't just another woman. She had once been Emily's closest friend, the one who had stood by her through college exams, heartbreaks, and late-night conversations about dreams and futures. To see her best friend in a white dress, smiling up at her ex-husband, was a betrayal Emily could never have imagined. The guests didn't know where to look. Some stared at Emily with pity, others with judgment, and a few with thinly veiled delight at the scandal unraveling before them. But Emily's eyes weren't on them. They were locked on Ryan, the man who had promised her forever, the man who had kissed her belly just months ago, whispering about the future they'd build for their child. Now his face drained of color as he saw her standing there, living proof of the promises he had abandoned. Vanessa, in her ivory gown dripping with pearls, gripped his arm tighter. Her smile faltered, then stiffened into defiance. She leaned close, whispering something meant to steady him. But the tremor in Ryan's jaw betrayed him. He hadn't expected Emily to show up. He thought she'd stay hidden, humiliated in silence. He thought he had erased her. But Emily was right there, in front of everyone. The whispers grew louder. Isn't that his wife? She's pregnant. With his baby? How could he? Ryan cleared his throat, forcing a laugh, trying to regain control of the narrative. Emily, he said loudly, as though he could command her presence into submission. This is highly inappropriate. His voice cracked at the edges, betraying his nerves. Emily didn't flinch. Her hands rested protectively over her belly, her eyes steady. Inappropriate? She repeated softly, her voice carrying farther than anyone expected in the silent room. You married my best friend while I'm carrying your child. Tell me, Ryan, what part of this story is appropriate? Gasps erupted. Vanessa's face flushed crimson and Ryan's composure slipped. He opened his mouth but no words came out. For the first time, the smooth-talking businessman had nothing to say. Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stood there, her silence more powerful than any accusation. And in that silence, Ryan realized something terrifying. He hadn't destroyed her. He had only freed her. The guests exchanged glances, their champagne suddenly bitter in their mouths. For years they had admired Ryan, the ambitious man climbing the corporate ladder. They had envied Vanessa's beauty and charm. But tonight, admiration turned to disgust. Sympathy turned toward Emily. She was no longer just the discarded wife. She was the wronged woman, the mother-to-be, the embodiment of dignity in the face of betrayal. And yet, beneath the quiet strength she showed, Emily's heart was breaking. Every beat echoed with the pain of betrayal, the humiliation of standing there, exposed and abandoned. She wanted to collapse, to run, to disappear into the shadows. But something deep inside held her upright. Maybe it was the tiny heartbeat within her, reminding her she wasn't alone. Maybe it was the knowledge that one day she would rise again. Because while Ryan and Vanessa thought this was the end of her story, it was only the beginning. She turned slowly, her back straight, and walked away from the ballroom. The whispers followed her, but she didn't look back. Each step felt like walking through fire, but she kept moving, one hand on her belly, the other clenched into a fist at her side. She didn't know what the future held. All she knew was that she had to survive this night, for herself and for the child she carried. What Emily couldn't know then was that fate had already written a new chapter for her. A chapter where she wouldn't just survive, she would thrive. A chapter where betrayal would turn into power, and where the girl they mocked tonight would one day walk back into this world as the wife of a billionaire. But for now, the pain was raw, the betrayal fresh, and the humiliation unbearable. She stepped into the night, the cool air biting at her skin, tears stinging her eyes. Somewhere behind her, Ryan and Vanessa tried to resume their celebration, but the damage was done. Their wedding would forever be remembered, not for love or joy, but for the night their discarded past returned to haunt them. And though Emily felt broken, she was not destroyed. The cracks in her heart were only the beginning of a transformation that would stun everyone, including the man who had betrayed her. Because sometimes the woman left in the shadows comes back shining brighter than anyone ever imagined. Emily Carter wasn't born into wealth or privilege. She came from a small town in Ohio, a place where neighbors still waved from their porches and everyone knew each other's names. Her childhood home was a modest two-bedroom house that smelled of fresh bread and laundry soap. Her father worked long shifts as a mechanic, his hands always stained with oil, while her mother balanced part-time jobs to keep food on the table. Despite the struggles, there was love. Emily grew up surrounded by warmth, laughter, and the unshakable belief that family was everything. Her parents taught her resilience, kindness, and humility. She was never the prettiest girl in class, nor the wealthiest, but she was the one everyone trusted, the girl who would share her lunch, stay after school to help a struggling classmate, or volunteer to organize the library shelves. Her dream wasn't extravagant. Emily wanted to be a teacher. She loved children, loved the way their eyes lit up when they discovered something new. She imagined herself in a cozy classroom, shaping young minds, giving them the encouragement she had once been given. And she worked tirelessly for it. Scholarships, part-time jobs, tutoring sessions, all while carrying the weight of responsibility for her younger siblings after her father passed away unexpectedly when she was 19. Life was never easy, but Emily never complained. She believed that with enough love and hard work, happiness would eventually come. And for a while, she thought it had. She met Ryan Mitchell at 23. He was everything her small-town world was not: confident, ambitious, and charming in a way that made her believe the universe had sent him just for her. Ryan worked in finance, and though he wasn't wealthy yet, he had big dreams. He talked about skyscrapers, luxury apartments, and a life where money would never be a problem. To Emily, who had lived paycheck to paycheck her whole life, his confidence was intoxicating. Their relationship bloomed quickly. Ryan courted her with roses, surprise dinners, and whispered promises of forever. He made her feel seen in a way she never had before. When he told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met, she believed him. Not because she thought it was true, but because he made her feel it was. For Emily, love wasn't about the fancy dinners or the sparkly gifts. It was about the way Ryan looked at her, as if she were his entire world. Within a year, they were married in a small ceremony at a church decorated with daisies and fairy lights. Emily wore a borrowed dress, and Ryan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Or so she thought. Marriage at first was sweet. Emily supported Ryan's long hours at the office, cooking dinners that went cold waiting for him to come home, leaving little notes in his briefcase to remind him he was loved. She believed in him wholeheartedly, even when his temper flared over bills or when his ambition made him restless. When he sighed about not having enough money or not climbing the corporate ladder fast enough, she reassured him that success would come. She believed her role was to be his anchor, the steady hand that held everything together while he chased his dreams. Then came the day she found out she was pregnant. She had been nervous, of course. Money was tight, and she worried about whether they were ready. But when she told Ryan, he swept her into his arms and laughed, calling her his lucky star. For one brief moment, Emily felt like the happiest woman alive. She imagined late-night lullabies, family picnics, little shoes by the door. She imagined Ryan holding their child with the same tenderness he once held her. But the cracks began to show. Pregnancy wasn't easy on Emily. The morning sickness was relentless, and the fatigue hit harder than she expected. She still worked long hours as a second-grade teacher, grading papers late into the night while trying to ignore the nausea. Ryan, meanwhile, grew impatient. Instead of the doting husband she hoped for, he became more distant, more critical. He complained about expenses, doctor visits, vitamins, baby clothes, and yet he spent freely on himself, buying new suits and taking clients out to expensive dinners. Emily tried to ignore it. She told herself he was stressed, that the pressure of providing was getting to him. She made excuses because that's what love does. It blinds you to the red flags waving in front of your face. Through it all, she leaned on her best friend, Vanessa Brooks. Vanessa had been her rock since college. Outgoing, glamorous, always the life of the party. Where Emily was quiet and steady, Vanessa was bold and fearless. They balanced each other perfectly, or so Emily believed. She trusted Vanessa with her secrets, her fears, even her joys about becoming a mother. Vanessa was supposed to be the godmother of the baby. Emily never doubted her loyalty. But behind Emily's back, something far darker was unfolding. Ryan and Vanessa were growing closer. What started as harmless conversations over drinks turned into late-night messages, then stolen kisses. By the time Emily was 6 months pregnant, their betrayal was complete. Ryan convinced himself he deserved more than a tired, struggling wife. Vanessa convinced herself she was simply seizing happiness. Together, they convinced each other that Emily was the obstacle. Emily didn't see it. Not yet. She still believed her love was enough to hold her marriage together. She still left little notes in Ryan's briefcase, still called Vanessa when she felt lonely. She still dreamed of a future where the three of them, husband, wife, and best friend, would raise her child in love and laughter. But that dream was about to collapse. And when it did, it would break her heart in ways she never thought she could survive. Because Emily wasn't just about to lose her husband. She was about to lose her best friend. And the world she thought was built on trust and loyalty would come crashing down around her. What Emily didn't know was that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you were truly meant to become. The apartment on West 42nd Street wasn't glamorous by New York standards. It was a modest one-bedroom space with thin walls that let in the muffled sounds of the city, the honk of taxis, the hum of late-night traffic, the occasional neighbor's argument drifting through the hallway. The paint on the kitchen cabinets had started to chip, and the bathroom tiles carried faint stains that no amount of scrubbing could erase. But to Emily, that little apartment had once felt like a safe haven. When she first moved in with Ryan, she imagined it as the beginning of their new life together. She filled the tiny shelves with secondhand novels, lined the kitchen counter with jars of homemade jam, and placed fresh flowers on the table every week, no matter how tight their budget. For her, those small touches were proof that love could make even the smallest space feel like a castle. But as the months of pregnancy wore on, the atmosphere in the apartment began to change. Ryan no longer saw the cozy warmth Emily tried to create. To him, the peeling paint and creaky floors were reminders of how far he still had to climb. He wanted more money, more power, more recognition. And instead of seeing Emily as his partner in the struggle, he began to view her as part of the weight holding him back. The argument started small. Ryan complained about the grocery bills, about the electricity costs, about Emily's inability to work longer hours despite her growing belly. He snapped when she bought prenatal vitamins instead of the cheaper generic brand, rolled his eyes when she suggested they save for the baby's crib. "You don't understand what it takes to make it in this city," he would mutter, loosening his tie as he dropped his briefcase on the couch. "I'm the one putting in the hours, Emily. I'm the one trying to get us out of this hole." Emily never argued back, at least not at first. She reminded herself he was stressed, that men often carried their burdens in silence. She told herself her job was to be supportive, to make their home a place of peace after his long days. So she cooked his favorite meals, even when the smell of food made her nauseous. She rubbed his shoulders when he came home late, even as her own back ached from carrying their child. But no matter how hard she tried, the tension in the apartment grew thicker. The place that had once echoed with laughter now pulsed with silence and sharp words. The chipped walls seemed to absorb every fight, every tear, every slammed door. Emily found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the man who had once kissed her forehead with tenderness could now look at her with irritation. Vanessa was still a constant presence. She would stop by often, bringing takeout or bottles of wine, claiming she wanted to keep Emily company during her pregnancy. To Emily, her friends' visits were a blessing, someone to talk to, someone who listened when Ryan dismissed her fears. She never noticed the way Vanessa's eyes lingered on Ryan when he walked into the room, or how her laughter grew louder in his presence. The cracks in Emily's marriage deepened, but she patched them with hope. She kept telling herself that once the baby arrived, Ryan would change. The sight of their child, the weight of fatherhood, would remind him of the love they once shared. She clung to that belief like a lifeline, even as her instincts whispered that something was terribly wrong. Her teaching job became her escape. In the classroom, surrounded by wide-eyed second graders, Emily could still feel a sense of purpose. The children's drawings covered her desk, little crayon hearts and stick figures labeled Miss Carter. Their innocence reminded her of why she had chosen this path: to nurture, to guide, to love unconditionally. But even there, the fatigue of pregnancy and the heaviness of her secret fears followed her. She would press a hand to her belly between lessons, whispering promises to her unborn child. "We'll be okay. Mommy will keep you safe." Back at the apartment, the atmosphere grew colder. Ryan spent more nights out, claiming work dinners or networking events. He came home smelling of expensive cologne. Emily didn't own and carrying receipts for dinners that cost more than their monthly rent. When she asked about it, he brushed her off with a quick kiss and a promise to explain later. Later never came. Still, Emily tried. She painted the baby's corner in soft yellow, saving every dollar to buy second-hand baby clothes and gently used furniture. She dreamed of filling the apartment with laughter again, of rocking her child to sleep in the small nursery she had created in the corner of their bedroom. She wanted to believe the little apartment could still be a place of love. But the walls seemed to whisper the truth she wasn't ready to face. The tension between Ryan and Emily reached a breaking point one stormy night. The rain pounded against the windows and the lights flickered from the force of the wind. Emily had spent the day nauseous and exhausted, dragging herself through work before rushing home to prepare dinner. Ryan arrived late, drenched in rain, his mood foul. He glanced at the simple meal she had cooked, chicken soup and bread, and sneered. "This is what I come home to, after the day I've had?" Tears stung her eyes, but she swallowed them. "It's what I could manage, Ryan. I'm doing my best." "Your best isn't good enough," he snapped, slamming his briefcase down. The words cut deeper than he realized. Emily turned away, hiding the hurt on her face. She didn't argue, didn't scream. She simply placed her hand on her belly, grounding herself in the only truth that mattered, that she had to endure for the sake of her child. That night, lying awake as Ryan snored beside her, Emily realized something had shifted. The apartment no longer felt like a home. It was a cage, trapping her between the woman she once was and the woman she was becoming. And though she didn't know it yet, she was standing on the edge of a storm far greater than a failing marriage or a modest apartment. She was about to lose everything she thought she needed, only to discover the strength she never knew she had. Because sometimes it's in the smallest, most fragile spaces that the strongest souls are forged. For weeks, Emily sensed something was wrong, though she fought to silence the voice inside her. She wanted to believe Ryan was simply stressed, that Vanessa was simply being a supportive friend. But late nights and whispered phone calls piled up like storm clouds. And when the truth finally came crashing down, it struck with the force of lightning. It was a Saturday afternoon when the pieces began to fall apart. Emily had spent the morning folding baby clothes, soft onesies, and tiny socks gifted by her coworkers. She hummed quietly as she worked, her hand resting on her growing belly. Ryan had claimed he was attending a networking brunch with colleagues, but hours passed and he hadn't returned her calls. At first, she told herself he was busy. Then, while cleaning, she stumbled upon a receipt tucked into the pocket of his suit jacket. Her heart sank as she read the words, "The Grand Marquis Hotel, Executive Suite. Dinner for 2. Champagne." Strawberries. The bill was dated the same night he had told her he was working late at the office. Her chest tightened. Her first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a client dinner, maybe he had treated a colleague. But deep down, she knew. The unease that had gnawed at her for months wasn't paranoia. It was truth, raw and brutal. And still, the cruelest confirmation was yet to come. That evening, exhausted from the weight of suspicion, Emily decided to surprise Vanessa. She longed for comfort, for her best friend's reassurance. She waddled down the familiar walk to Vanessa's apartment, clutching a small gift bag with a framed sonogram inside, something she wanted to share with the woman she thought of as a sister. But when she opened the door, her world shattered. The apartment smelled faintly of cologne and red wine. The lights were dim, the air heavy with something unspoken. And there, sprawled on the couch in nothing but tangled sheets, were Ryan and Vanessa. His shirt was half undone, her lipstick smudged. Their laughter died the moment they saw her standing in the doorway, wide-eyed, belly full, and gift bag trembling in her hand. For a moment, silence. Then Vanessa sat up, her face pale but her eyes flashing with defiance. "Emily, you weren't supposed to." "Supposed to what?" Emily's voice cracked, the words trembling on her lips. "Walk in on my husband with my best friend?" Ryan scrambled to his feet, his expression caught between anger and shame. "It's not what you think." "Don't you dare," Emily whispered, tears streaking her face. "Don't you dare lie to me again." Her hand instinctively covered her belly, as though shielding her unborn child from the ugliness before her. Ryan's face hardened. "Emily, you don't understand. I need more than what we have. You've changed. You're not the woman I married. You're dragging me down." The words sliced through her like glass. "And you?" Emily turned to Vanessa, the friend who had once held her hair back during college hangovers, the friend she had trusted with every secret. "You could do this to me? To us?" Vanessa didn't flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms, her lips curving into a smirk that chilled Emily's blood. "I'm tired of standing in your shadow, Emily. You've always been the fragile one, the helpless one. Ryan deserves someone who can match his ambition, not someone stuck teaching kids and clipping coupons." The cruelty in her tone was worse than the betrayal itself. Emily staggered back, gripping the doorframe for support. The baby shifted inside her, as if sensing her pain. Her chest heaved, but she refused to collapse in front of them. Somehow she found the strength to speak. "You deserve each other," she whispered. "Both of you." She left before they could respond, the sound of Vanessa's mocking laughter trailing behind her like a curse. That night, Emily wept harder than she ever had before. Every corner of the apartment felt poisoned by memories. Every picture frame a cruel reminder of the life she thought she had. She tore the sheets from the bed, unable to bear the thought of Ryan's touch. She sat on the nursery chair, clutching a tiny pair of baby shoes to her chest, sobbing until there were no tears left. The days that followed blurred into one another. Ryan didn't apologize. Instead, he moved out of their apartment, openly flaunting his new relationship with Vanessa. He called it liberation, as if breaking his vows and destroying Emily's trust was some noble act of self-discovery. Worse, he twisted the story to anyone who would listen. At work, among mutual friends, even with distant relatives, Ryan painted Emily as unstable, too emotional, too weak to handle the pressures of marriage. Vanessa echoed his lies, telling people that Emily was jealous, bitter, and unfit to stand by a man of Ryan's stature. It was character assassination, and Emily had no defense. Her voice was drowned out by their charm, their confidence, their carefully curated image. The woman carrying his child became a footnote in their glamorous new narrative. The humiliation cut deeper than the betrayal itself. At grocery stores she overheard whispers. At work, colleagues offered pitying looks, though none dared to ask outright. Even walking down the street, Emily felt eyes burning into her, as though everyone knew her shame. And yet, through the wreckage, she endured. For the baby, she told herself. For the tiny heartbeat she heard during doctor's visits, the gentle kicks against her ribs that reminded her she wasn't alone. Her life had been reduced to ashes, but inside her grew a reason to rise again. Still, she couldn't shake the echo of Ryan's words. "You're dragging me down." They haunted her dreams, carved scars into her self-worth. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw not the vibrant young woman she once was, but the broken shell he wanted her to believe she was. What she didn't yet realize was that betrayal has a strange power. It destroys, yes, but it also awakens. And in the quiet of those lonely nights, as she held her belly and whispered promises to her unborn child, something within Emily began to stir. It wasn't rage, though rage flickered in the shadows. It wasn't vengeance, though vengeance would one day come. It was resolve. A seed of determination planted deep inside her. Ryan and Vanessa thought they had crushed her, that she would fade into obscurity while they basked in the glow of their stolen happiness. But they had underestimated Emily. They had no idea that the woman they discarded was destined for a life far beyond anything they could ever grasp. Because betrayal may break a heart, but it can also forge an unshakable fire. And Emily's fire was only just beginning to burn. The wedding of Ryan Mitchell and Vanessa Brooks was billed as the social event of the season. Glossy invitations printed on embossed ivory paper had been mailed to New York's elite weeks in advance. The venue, a historic cathedral-turned-luxury event hall, boasted ceilings painted with golden frescoes and crystal chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. Every detail screamed opulence. Cascading floral arrangements imported from Holland, a 10-tier cake sculpted with edible pearls, and a guest list that read like a society column. For Ryan and Vanessa, it wasn't just a wedding. It was a performance, a declaration to the world that they had won. Emily hadn't planned to attend. Why would she? Watching the man she once loved pledge himself to her former best friend was the kind of torment she wanted to avoid. But fate had other plans. A mutual acquaintance, unaware of the depth of betrayal, pressed an invitation into her hand. "You should come," they said kindly. "Show them you're strong. Don't let them erase you." At first, Emily shoved the invitation into a drawer, determined to stay far away. But as the days passed, something inside her shifted. Why should she hide? Why should she be the one to cower in the shadows while they flaunted their betrayal under chandeliers and champagne? She was carrying Ryan's child. She had given her heart, her loyalty, her everything. If they wanted a spectacle, then she would not be erased from it. And so, on the day of the wedding, Emily found herself walking up the stone steps of the cathedral, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with whispers and excitement. Guests sipped champagne, their eyes darting across the room, eager for a glimpse of the bride and groom. The music swelled, filling the air with triumphant notes. Ryan stood at the altar, tall and smug in his tailored tuxedo, exuding the confidence of a man who believed he had triumphed over fate. Beside him, Vanessa glowed in a couture gown that sparkled under the lights. She radiated triumph, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. And then the murmurs began. It started as a ripple in the back pews and moved forward like a tidal wave. Heads turned, whispers hissed, and gasps broke the music's rhythm. Emily had entered. She wore a simple dress, nothing compared to the glittering gowns around her, but her presence commanded the room. Her belly, round and undeniable, was the loudest statement of all. Every eye shifted between her and Ryan, between the man in his tuxedo and the woman who bore his child. The ceremony faltered. Ryan's face paled. Vanessa's smile wavered. For one fleeting moment, the entire illusion threatened to collapse. Emily walked slowly down the aisle, not toward the altar, but to an empty seat near the front. She did not speak, she did not cry. She simply sat, her chin high, her hands folded over her stomach, her very presence a silent accusation. The priest hesitated, his voice trembling as he continued the vows. The words meant to symbolize purity and unity now dripped with irony. "Do you, Ryan Mitchell, take this woman?" The guests shifted uncomfortably, their gazes flicking back to Emily, whose steady eyes never left the couple. When it came time for the exchange of vows, Ryan's voice cracked. He glanced at Emily, then at Vanessa, sweat beading on his forehead. "I do," he stammered, but the conviction was gone. Vanessa squeezed his hand, forcing her own "I do" through gritted teeth. She knew the damage was irreversible. Their fairy tale wedding had been hijacked by the very woman they had tried to erase. And then came the kiss. The guests applauded weakly, but the sound was hollow. The scandal had already spread like wildfire. Phones buzzed under the tables, fingers typing furiously as gossip flew across social media. Ryan Mitchell's pregnant ex-wife just showed up at his wedding to Vanessa Brooks. "She's carrying his child," "You won't believe this." The humiliation was complete. The image Ryan and Vanessa had so carefully crafted, a vision of love, ambition, and triumph, was now stained forever. Instead of admiration, their wedding would be remembered as the day their betrayal was laid bare. Emily sat through the entire ceremony, silent but unshakable. She refused to leave, refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Every second was agony, but she endured it. Not for Ryan, not for Vanessa, not even for the whispering crowd. She endured it for the life growing inside her, for the proof that she was more than the betrayal they had built their future upon. When the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled into the reception hall, buzzing with scandal. Emily followed, her presence still casting a long shadow. She watched from the corner as Ryan introduced Vanessa as his wife. His smile stretched too thin, his charm faltering under the weight of whispers. And then, as if fate demanded one final twist of the knife, Vanessa approached Emily. Her gown trailed across the marble floor, her bouquet clutched like a weapon. She leaned down, her voice low enough for only Emily to hear. "You should have stayed home," she hissed. "You look pathetic." Emily met her gaze, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Enjoy your moment, Vanessa, because moments fade, and when they do, you'll realize all you built was on lies." Vanessa's face blanched, her confidence cracking. For the first time, Emily saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. As Emily turned to leave, she felt a quiet strength rise within her. Yes, she had been humiliated. Yes, the world had seen her pain, but humiliation wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Because while Ryan and Vanessa celebrated their hollow victory, Emily was already on a different path. One that would lead her away from betrayal and into a future brighter than either of them could ever imagine. One day, she would walk into a ballroom again. But next time, she wouldn't come as the betrayed wife. She would come as the woman who rose from the ashes to become a billionaire's wife. And when that day came, Ryan and Vanessa would finally understand the true meaning of humiliation. The night after Ryan and Vanessa's wedding, Emily lay alone in her dim apartment. The city's neon lights bled through the blinds, but inside, the room was silent, hollow, heavy with the echo of her humiliation. She sat in the nursery corner she had built with her own hands. Yellow walls painted carefully, second-hand crib polished until it shined, stuffed animals arranged with love. But instead of joy, she felt only emptiness. Her phone buzzed endlessly that night. Messages from coworkers, distant relatives, even neighbors. "Are you okay? I saw the photos online. Stay strong." But the pity in their words crushed her more than the silence would have. The whole world seemed to know her pain, and she had nowhere to hide. When dawn broke, Emily forced herself out of bed. She couldn't afford to collapse completely. She was 8 months pregnant, and her child needed her. Still, the loneliness gnawed at her bones. She had imagined this time of her life filled with excitement. Ryan painting the nursery, Vanessa planning a baby shower. Instead, she stood alone, cradling her belly, whispering promises into the silence. "Don't worry, little one. Mommy's here. Mommy won't ever leave you." But her voice cracked, betraying the doubt she couldn't silence. The weeks crawled by, each day heavier than the last. Ryan never called. Not once. No check-ins, no offers of help, no acknowledgement that she carried his child. He had vanished completely into his new life with Vanessa, parading her across social media and society columns. Emily tried not to look, but the headlines found her anyway. Power couple Ryan and Vanessa celebrate their honeymoon in Paris. Ryan Mitchell's stunning wife wins over investors. Every headline was another dagger. And then, one stormy night, it happened. Emily woke to sharp pains stabbing her abdomen. She gasped, clutching her belly as the contractions rippled through her. It was too soon, still weeks before her due date, but the baby was coming. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling. Instinctively, she scrolled to Ryan's name, her thumb hovering over the screen. But then she stopped. He wouldn't come. She knew that now. So she dialed 911, her voice breaking as she explained her situation. Within minutes, flashing lights painted the walls of her apartment. Paramedics rushed in, lifting her onto a stretcher as her body convulsed with pain. Rain pounded against the ambulance windows as sirens wailed into the night. At the hospital, the sterile white walls blurred in her vision. Nurses barked instructions. Doctors moved quickly. and Emily clung to the sound of her own heartbeat, desperate not to lose herself in the chaos. Hours stretched like eternity. Sweat drenched her body, her screams echoing through the room as she fought for the life inside her. And then at last, the cry of a newborn filled the air. A boy. The doctor placed him on her chest, tiny and fragile, his skin warm against her trembling hands. Emily sobbed uncontrollably, kissing his damp forehead, whispering through her tears, "We made it, baby. We made it." But as the joy of birth settled, so too did the crushing weight of reality. She was alone. No father to hold her hand, no friend to celebrate this miracle. Just Emily, her newborn son, and the endless silence of an empty hospital room. When the nurse wheeled her to recovery, Emily stared at the sleeping baby in her arms. She named him Jacob, after her father, the man who had taught her resilience, who had worked himself to the bone to protect his family. As she whispered his name, she felt a flicker of strength. But the road ahead terrified her. Bills piled up quickly. Hospital costs, baby supplies, rent. Her teacher's salary barely stretched enough to cover formula and diapers. She learned to go without meals, to patch her shoes instead of buying new ones, to silence her own needs for the sake of her son. Nights were the hardest. Jacob's cries pierced the stillness, and Emily rocked him in the nursery chair, exhaustion carving shadows into her face. Sometimes she broke down, like whispering apologies into his tiny ear. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry you don't have the life you deserve." The loneliness gnawed deeper than hunger. She watched other mothers at the park with strollers, their husbands beside them, sharing smiles, holding hands. She longed for that simple comfort, for someone to share the burden. But every time she imagined Ryan in that role, her chest burned with betrayal. He had chosen Vanessa. He had chosen ambition over love, status over family. Still, Emily pushed forward. She returned to teaching just weeks after giving birth, leaving Jacob with a kind neighbor during the day. She worked until her body ached, then hurried home to care for him through the night. Each day blurred into the next. Wake, work, care, repeat. There was no time to grieve, no time to rest, only survival. And yet, despite everything, Jacob's presence was her anchor. His tiny fingers wrapping around hers, his soft coos in the quiet hours, those moments reminded her why she had to keep going. When he smiled for the first time, something inside Emily cracked open. It wasn't just love, it was purpose. But purpose didn't erase pain. Emily still cried when the bills arrived, still shook with exhaustion when Jacob's fever spiked, still lay awake wondering how her life had unraveled so completely. One night, as she sat by the window rocking Jacob, she whispered, "Maybe this is it. Maybe this is all we'll ever have, just the two of us, scraping by." But deep down, a stubborn ember refused to die. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Carter blood doesn't quit. And for the first time since the betrayal, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. Because as broken as she felt, as lost as she seemed, the world had a way of shifting when you least expected it. And though she couldn't see it yet, her path was already bending toward something greater. One day soon, she would no longer be the woman abandoned at a wedding. She would no longer be the mother scraping by on pennies. She would rise, not just for herself, but for the son sleeping in her arms. And when that day came, Ryan and Vanessa would regret every cruel word, every selfish choice. But for now, in that tiny apartment, Emily simply held her son close and whispered a promise into the darkness. "We will rise, Jacob. I don't know how, but we will." The turning point came on a day Emily never expected. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. Her umbrella had snapped in the wind, soaking her dress as she rushed across the slick sidewalks of Midtown Manhattan. She had left school late, weighed down by a stack of ungraded papers and the constant worry of how she would pay next month's rent. Jacob had a fever, and she had only a few dollars left until her next paycheck. Her exhaustion ran deeper than her bones. It lived in her soul. She ducked into a corner cafe for shelter, shivering as the bell above the door jingled. The place smelled of fresh espresso and warm croissants, but Emily barely noticed. She ordered the cheapest tea on the menu and settled into a corner seat, clutching her bag close. That's when fate intervened. The door opened, and a man stepped inside. He carried himself with quiet authority, his tailored coat shedding droplets of rain, his presence commanding even in the simple act of walking to the counter. People glanced up, then quickly away, as though they knew instinctively that he was someone important. Emily didn't recognize him at first. To her, he was just another well-dressed stranger. But when the barista stammered his name, "Mr. Harrington, your usual?" her heart skipped. She had heard that name before. Alexander Harrington. Billionaire CEO of Harrington Tech, a man whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose speeches were quoted in business journals. Emily tried to disappear into her corner, embarrassed by her damp clothes and tired face. But fate wasn't done with her yet. As Alexander collected his coffee, a commotion broke out near the counter. A young woman slipped on the wet floor, sending her tray crashing. Without hesitation, Emily rose from her seat and rushed forward, helping the woman to her feet, soothing her with calm words. She didn't realize Alexander was watching until their eyes met. There was something in his gaze, not just curiosity but recognition, as though he saw past her shabby exterior and glimpsed the strength she herself had forgotten. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked, his voice low, steady. Emily nodded quickly, flustered. "I'm fine, just helping." But he didn't look away. Not many people act that quickly for a stranger. "It's nothing," she murmured, retreating toward her table. But the moment lingered. As she gathered her things to leave, Alexander approached. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. Emily blinked. "You want to sit here?" "If you don't mind." Part of her wanted to refuse, to avoid the attention, but politeness won. "Of course." He sat, studying her with quiet intensity. "Forgive me for being direct, but you look like you're carrying more than rainwater on your shoulders." Emily stiffened. She wasn't used to strangers cutting through her walls. "Just a long day." "Long days leave different marks," Alexander replied softly. "Yours look heavier than most." His words disarmed her. Against her better judgment, she found herself speaking about teaching, about raising Jacob alone, about the struggles that never seemed to end. She didn't mention Ryan by name, but the story of betrayal hung between her words. Alexander listened, truly listened. No interruptions, no pitying glances, just steady attention. When she faltered, he said quietly, "You've been carrying a weight no one should carry alone." Something cracked inside Emily. For months, she had fought in silence, burying her pain under duty and survival. And here was a man, wealthy beyond her imagination, powerful in ways she couldn't fathom, speaking to her as though her story mattered. When Jacob's babysitter called, Emily excused herself. "I should go, my son needs me." Alexander's brow lifted slightly. "You're a mother?" "Yes," she hesitated. "He's all I have." For the first time, a small smile touched Alexander's lips. "Then you're richer than most people in this city." Emily left the cafe that night shaken. She told herself it was nothing, a chance encounter, but it wasn't the last time. 2 weeks later, at a charity event hosted by the school district, Emily spotted Alexander again. He was the keynote speaker, donating millions to fund technology in classrooms. When the principal introduced her as one of the most dedicated teachers in the program, Alexander's gaze found hers across the room. This time, recognition lit his eyes. Afterward, he sought her out. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, "we meet again." Her cheeks flushed. "I didn't expect to see you here. And I didn't expect to be impressed twice by the same person in such a short time." Their conversation flowed easily, surprising Emily. Alexander wasn't just a billionaire with polished charm. He asked real questions about her students, about Jacob, about her dreams. When she admitted she once wanted to pursue graduate studies but couldn't afford it, his eyes softened. "It seems to me the world would be better if you had the chance." That night, Alexander sent a discreet donation to her school in Emily's name. She only found out weeks later when new supplies arrived and her principal thanked her for inspiring generosity. Emily was stunned. For the first time in months, she felt seen, valued, not as a burden, not as a failure, but as a woman whose resilience mattered. Still, she was cautious. She had been burned before, betrayed by those closest to her. She told herself Alexander's kindness was nothing more than philanthropy. And yet, when he asked if he could meet Jacob, she found herself saying yes. The day Alexander met her son was the day Emily's world began to shift for good. Jacob, barely 6 months old, reached for him with tiny hands. Alexander cradled him effortlessly, his expression softening in a way Emily hadn't expected from the powerful CEO. "He's strong," Alexander said, his voice almost reverent. like his mother. Emily's heart trembled. No one had ever said those words to her. It wasn't love at first sight, not in the fairy tale sense. It was something steadier, deeper. A recognition that her life wasn't destined to remain in ashes. That maybe, just maybe, she and Jacob deserved more than survival. And though she didn't yet know where this connection would lead, Emily sensed one thing with certainty. Her story was no longer just one of betrayal and loss. Fate had opened a new door. And on the other side stood Alexander Harrington, the man who would change everything. The months after meeting Alexander Harrington unfolded like chapters from a book Emily never believed she would be allowed to read. At first, she resisted the change. She was used to scraping by, used to lowering her eyes, used to surviving. But Alexander didn't just give her kindness, he gave her something far rarer. He gave her permission to rise. It started subtly. He invited her to events, not the glittering galas of high society just yet, but intimate gatherings, charity board meetings, small dinners with trusted friends. Emily was hesitant at first, clinging to the modest dresses she had worn since college. She was terrified of judgment, of whispers that she didn't belong. But Alexander never let her feel small. He introduced her with quiet pride, always adding, "This is Emily Carter. She's one of the strongest women I know." Those words planted a seed. Slowly, Emily began to see herself differently. Not as the woman abandoned, but as the woman who endured. Not as the teacher barely making rent, but as the mother who refused to give up. She began carrying herself differently. Her shoulders back, her chin lifted. Her clothes, though simple, seemed to transform when paired with her newfound confidence. And then came the day Alexander insisted on taking her shopping. "Emily," he said gently, "you've been carrying the weight of the world on your back for too long. Let me give you something. Not charity, just a mirror to show you who you truly are." She resisted at first, embarrassed. "I don't need expensive clothes to feel worthy." He smiled. "You're right, but sometimes the world needs to be reminded." He took her to a boutique where the air smelled of leather and silk, where the attendants treated her with reverence she had never experienced. Emily stood frozen in front of a mirror, wearing a sleek navy dress that hugged her figure. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. "Do you see?" Alexander asked softly, standing behind her reflection. "You are power. You are grace. You've always been both. You just forgot." Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't the dress, it wasn't the boutique, it was the way he looked at her, as if her scars made her stronger, as if her pain had forged a beauty the world had overlooked. That moment was a spark. Emily began to allow herself to dream again. She pursued graduate classes online, supported by Alexander's quiet encouragement. She started writing articles about education reform, her voice gaining traction in journals and conferences. Soon, she wasn't just Emily Carter the teacher, she was Emily Carter, advocate, leader, woman with a voice. Her transformation was not instant. There were nights when doubt crept in, when memories of Ryan's cruel words, "You're dragging me down," echoed like ghosts. But each time Alexander reminded her of who she was becoming, and Jacob, her son, was her daily proof. His laughter, his tiny arms wrapped around her neck, his innocent eyes looking up at her as if she were his entire world. Those moments grounded her. One evening, Alexander invited her to accompany him to a small business summit. "You don't have to speak," he assured her. "Just observe." But when one of the panelists mentioned the struggles of underfunded schools, Emily's passion broke through. She spoke up, shy at first, then with growing conviction. She shared her own experiences as a teacher, the children she had seen fall behind, not for lack of intelligence, but for lack of resources. Her words silenced the room. By the time she finished, the audience broke into applause. Alexander leaned close, his voice filled with pride. "Do you hear that? That's you stepping into your power." Emily blushed, but inside, something shifted. For the first time in years, she felt not just alive but unstoppable. The transformation wasn't just internal. Outwardly, she began to radiate a confidence that startled even those who had pitied her. The tired mother who once walked into Ryan and Vanessa's wedding, humiliated, was gone. In her place stood a woman with fire in her eyes, her presence commanding attention without her saying a word. News of her evolution spread. Photos of her attending summits beside Alexander appeared in magazines. Articles quoted her insights on education. Slowly, whispers began to shift. Is that Ryan Mitchell's ex-wife? Turned into, that's Emily Carter. She's extraordinary. Ryan and Vanessa saw it too. From the glossy pages of society magazines, from the gossip whispered in their circles, they could no longer escape her presence. The woman they thought they had destroyed was rising higher than they ever could. But Emily wasn't thinking about revenge, not yet. Her focus was on growth, on proving to herself and her son that they were more than the ashes of betrayal. Still, fate had its way of circling back. The first gala she attended with Alexander marked the true unveiling of her transformation. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers and crystal, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Alexander stood tall beside her, his hand resting lightly at her back, his eyes filled with quiet pride. The moment they entered, conversations faltered. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. Emily, in a gown of emerald silk, her hair swept elegantly, her smile calm and assured, was no longer the fragile woman abandoned at a wedding. She was power incarnate, a phoenix reborn. Whispers followed her through the room, but they were no longer cruel. They were filled with awe. Is that Emily Carter? She looks incredible. She's with Alexander Harrington? Emily held her head high, her heart steady. She wasn't here to flaunt, wasn't here to prove anything to Ryan or Vanessa. She was here because she belonged. And yet, deep down, she knew her story with them wasn't finished. The time would come when she would stand face to face with the people who had broken her. But when that day arrived, she would not meet them as the humiliated wife or the abandoned friend. She would meet them as the woman she had become. Resilient, radiant, unstoppable. Her transformation was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, her future. And as she glanced across the ballroom, the man who once left her for dead in spirit could no longer deny it. Emily Carter was untouchable. Because when a woman rises from the ashes, she doesn't just survive, she reigns. The Harrington Foundation Gala was the event of the year. Every corner of the grand ballroom at the plaza glimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, polished to a mirror shine, and tables draped in gold-trimmed linens. The city's most powerful figures gathered under one roof. CEOs, senators, philanthropists, journalists, and celebrities. It was not just a gala. It was the stage where reputations were built and destroyed. Emily Carter entered that stage transformed. She wore a gown of deep sapphire velvet that clung elegantly to her figure. Her hair swept into a classic chignon, diamonds sparkling at her throat. Gifts from Alexander, who stood at her side. The crowd parted as they walked, cameras flashing, whispers spreading like wildfire. Who is she? That's Emily Carter, Harrington's partner. She's stunning, but beneath the admiration lay another current, one she could feel like electricity in the air. Her name was no longer just whispered with awe. It was whispered with recognition. She was Ryan Mitchell's ex-wife, the woman he had humiliated, the woman society had pitied. And now, she was walking into the most powerful room in New York, on the arm of Alexander Harrington. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of theater. Across the ballroom, Ryan and Vanessa arrived moments later. Ryan's tuxedo was sharp, his smile forced. Vanessa glittered in silver sequins, but her beauty had lost its shine under the strain of whispers that never seemed to fade. Their marriage, once paraded across magazines, had begun to crack under the weight of Ryan's failed ventures and Vanessa's growing insecurity. And now, as they spotted Emily, both froze. Ryan's face paled, his confidence draining as he realized the inevitable. The woman he had left behind, the woman he had mocked and discarded, was no longer in the shadows. She was the center of attention, and she no longer needed him or anyone's pity. Vanessa's jaw tightened, her smile faltering. She gripped Ryan's arm, whispering furiously, but his eyes were locked on Emily. Emily met their gaze without flinching. The night unfolded like a symphony of poetic justice. Emily glided through the crowd, speaking with senators, exchanging laughter with CEOs, her presence magnetic. Alexander introduced her not as his companion, but as his equal. "This is Emily Carter," he told every influential figure in the room, "an advocate for education and a woman whose strength I admire." Ryan and Vanessa tried to keep up appearances, mingling awkwardly. But whispers followed them like shadows. Guests glanced between Emily's radiant confidence and Vanessa's forced laughter, between Alexander's calm pride and Ryan's sweating brow. The contrast was undeniable. Then came the moment Emily had not anticipated, but fate demanded. The host called for speeches. Alexander, as the evening's main sponsor, was invited to the stage. He spoke with eloquence about innovation, philanthropy, and the importance of investing in education. Then, with a smile, he extended his hand toward Emily. "Tonight," he said, "I want you all to hear from someone who inspires me every day, Emily Carter." Gasps rippled across the room. Emily froze for half a heartbeat. Public speaking here, in front of the most powerful people in the city, was not part of the plan. But then she saw Ryan's face. His smug expectation that she would falter, his silent hope that she would crumble under the weight of the spotlight. She straightened her shoulders and stepped onto the stage. The ballroom hushed, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. She began softly. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I was abandoned, humiliated, left with nothing but the child I carried. I was told I wasn't enough, that I would never survive without the people who betrayed me." Murmurs stirred. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa's face tightened. Emily's voice grew stronger. "But I stand here tonight as proof that betrayal does not end us, it transforms us. That humiliation is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of strength. And that women, no matter how broken we are made to feel, can rise higher than anyone ever imagined." Applause erupted, thunderous and unrelenting. Emily's chest swelled as she continued, her eyes sweeping the room, landing briefly, intentionally, on Ryan and Vanessa. "I am not here tonight as someone's ex-wife," she declared. "I am here as a mother, a teacher, an advocate, and a woman who refused to stay broken. And I promise you this: no one, no matter how powerful they think they are, has the right to silence or diminish another human being." The applause became a standing ovation. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Ryan's face burned crimson. Vanessa looked ready to scream, her hand digging into his arm. The world was watching them, and for once, not in admiration. They were the villains of this story, and everyone in that ballroom knew it. Emily stepped down from the stage, her hand sliding into Alexander's. He kissed her knuckles gently, whispering, "You've just changed everything." And he was right. For Ryan, the humiliation was unbearable. Once admired, he now stood exposed, weak, desperate, overshadowed by the woman he had cast aside. Vanessa's fury boiled over, her whispers sharp and cutting. They left the gala early, their exit noticed by all, their reputations shattered further with every step. But for Emily, the night was more than revenge. It was redemption. She had not only confronted her past, she had risen above it. She had turned her pain into power, her shame into dignity. As the gala wound down, journalists clamored to capture her words, her image. Articles the next morning declared, "Emily Carter steals the spotlight at Harrington Gala." From betrayed wife to beacon of strength. The city no longer saw her as Ryan Mitchell's discarded wife. They saw her as Emily Carter, the woman who rose. And though she had finally claimed her victory, one truth burned brightest in her heart. Her revenge was never about destroying Ryan and Vanessa. It was about reclaiming herself. And in that, she had won everything. Because true revenge is not screaming or fighting, it's thriving so loudly that the world has no choice but to listen. The morning after the gala, New York was buzzing. Newspapers, blogs, and social media lit up with photos of Emily Carter standing on stage, radiant and unshakable. Her speech had gone viral, shared millions of times. Headlines called her a phoenix, a symbol of resilience, the woman who turned heartbreak into triumph. And for Ryan and Vanessa, the headlines were brutal. Ryan Mitchell and wife Vanessa leave gala early after awkward confrontation. Ex-wife Emily Carter outshines them all. The Harrington Gala belonged to her, not them. Investors began pulling away from Ryan's ventures. Clients canceled deals. His reputation, once his greatest asset, was now his downfall. Vanessa, who had once basked in being envied, found herself mocked instead. Every time she stepped out, cameras shouted Emily's name, not hers. And every glance from society's elite carried a hint of disdain. The poetic justice was undeniable. But Emily didn't gloat. She had no interest in watching them fall. Her revenge was already complete. Their downfall was simply the echo of her rise. For the first time in months, she woke up in her modest apartment with Jacob asleep beside her and felt peace. She brewed her coffee, sat by the window, and realized she no longer thought of Ryan with rage. He was nothing but a closed chapter, a man who had chosen greed over love, vanity over loyalty. And Vanessa, once her dearest friend, was no longer a wound but a scar, a reminder of betrayal survived. Her life was no longer defined by what they had taken from her. It was defined by what she had built from the ruins. That evening, Alexander came by, carrying Jacob in his arms, the baby giggling as though the world had no shadows. Alexander placed Jacob gently in his crib and turned to Emily, his eyes soft. "You know what I saw last night?" he asked. Emily tilted her head. "What?" "A woman who no longer needs anyone to tell her who she is. You've found yourself, Emily, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Her throat tightened with emotion. "I never thought I'd get here. I never thought I'd be more than broken." Alexander stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "Broken things don't shine, but you light up every room you walk into." For the first time, Emily didn't look away. She believed him. Weeks turned into months, and Emily's transformation only deepened. With Alexander's support, she launched an educational foundation in her name, dedicated to providing resources for underfunded schools. The same woman who once worried about affording baby clothes was now shaping the future for thousands of children. Her work gained national recognition, her voice requested at conferences and televised panels. And through it all, she remained grounded. She still packed Jacob's lunches, still read him bedtime stories, still walked him to the park on weekends. She was a mother first, and everything else was built on that foundation of love. The final thread of closure came unexpectedly. One evening, Emily received a letter in her mailbox. The handwriting was familiar, shaky, but unmistakable. "Ryan." She unfolded the letter slowly, her heart calm. "Emily, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because I've lost everything. Maybe because I finally see what I threw away. I saw your speech. I saw the woman you've become. And I can't lie. I hate myself for letting you go. Vanessa, it was all a mistake. She wanted me for my name, not my heart. We barely speak now. Investors won't touch me. I have nothing left. But you have everything. And you deserve it. I just wish I had been man enough to give it to you when I had the chance. Ryan." Emily read the words once, twice. A year ago, they would have shattered her. A year ago, she might have cried, might have clung to them like a lifeline. But now, she only felt clarity. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. She didn't need Ryan's apology. She didn't need his regret. Her life had moved beyond him, beyond Vanessa, beyond the shadows of betrayal. That night, as Jacob slept and Alexander sat beside her on the couch, Emily whispered, "I'm free." And she meant it. The final act of her story was not revenge, it was healing. True justice wasn't watching Ryan and Vanessa crumble. It was knowing that she had risen, that her son would grow up never doubting his mother's strength, that love could be rebuilt, not from desperation but from respect and truth. Months later, in a private ceremony surrounded by close friends, Emily stood at the altar once again. This time, it wasn't in humiliation. It wasn't with betrayal lurking in the pews. It was with Alexander, the man who had seen her at her weakest and still called her strong. As she said her vows, holding Jacob in her arms, Emily's heart was steady. She wasn't just marrying a billionaire. She was marrying a man who valued her scars as much as her beauty, who saw her not as someone broken, but as someone whole. The guests applauded as they kissed, but Emily hardly heard them. All she felt was peace, the kind that comes not from erasing the past, but from surviving it, growing from it, and building something new. And so, Emily's story closed not with bitterness, but with triumph. She was no longer the woman betrayed at a wedding, no longer the abandoned wife scraping by. She was Emily Carter, wife, mother, leader, survivor. Her message, spoken to every woman who had ever felt discarded, echoed far beyond the walls of that gala, far beyond the headlines and whispers. You are never as weak as they make you feel. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's living so fully that they no longer matter. So that's how Emily's story comes to a close. My friends, you're still here with me, right? If you've stayed all the way until now, it means something in her journey has touched your heart in a way you can't ignore. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles, or maybe it gave you a glimpse of hope you didn't know you needed. Emily's story is not just about betrayal or revenge, it's about resilience, about discovering that even when the world tries to break you, you can rise stronger than before. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." That's exactly what Emily did. She didn't control Ryan's betrayal or Vanessa's cruelty, but she chose to respond with dignity, with patience, and eventually with power. In our own lives, we all face storms. Sometimes it's heartbreak, sometimes failure, sometimes the crushing weight of feeling not enough. And yet, Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Emily's humiliation became the path to her transformation. And for you, whatever pain you're carrying right now, maybe that too is shaping you into someone you don't even recognize yet, but will one day be proud of. So if you're listening to me right now, let this be a reminder. You are not defined by the people who hurt you. You are defined by what you choose to do next. You have the power to rewrite your story, just like Emily did. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or even if it gave you just a little spark of courage, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we believe in stories that heal, that inspire, and that remind us of what it means to be human. Stay strong, my friends. Your comeback is just beginning.